Hello, we are back on Imperfect Parenting podcast. Last time I said Miss Brittney.
Yeah.
Brittney. My wife, Brittney.
There you go.
And Ben. I said Miss Brittney. You were like, welcome to the classroom.
Well, it's like it's Mrs. or Miss Brittney. I don't know.
Sorry. You and me, honey.
Yep. You and me, babe.
You and me.
That's where we are because Seth wasn't invited today.
He'll be back.
He will. But
You should meme them.
I should meme them. Okay. We are still talking about we're talking about sex still, but it's different in what we were talking about before. I think it's, the other time was more around just the practical, the how-to, the not being afraid. This feels like we're trying to cast vision and talk about different things around it. So, but this is a funny meme that kind of goes with that a little bit. It says 13-year-olds today are having relationship stress. When I was that age, I closed the fridge door slowly to see how the light goes off.
This is funny because it's true. I did that. I probably still do. No? Never now?
No. It's just showing that there's other ones I've seen that here's a 13-year-old girl's, like Ashley, our audio technician.
Creative genius.
And a creative director and videographer.
Champion.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
She's got lots of names.
Long title.
Of like all the things. She shows us a video of her at 13 doing a music video dance. And let's just say the ability to be sexy in any sense of the word was very low at 13, which it should be. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, though, you look at TikTok and these kids are like, what's happening?
Yeah.
How do we get here? But I wish we could show a clip of Ashley's video. Maybe Taylor can do some post-edit and throw it in there and she not know because it'd be hilarious. But it's awesome. I mean, that's what I remember doing. Like, I remember putting makeup on my chin and talking and singing underneath the blanket. You remember how you used to cover half your face and then it's like your chin was the face and they don't do that anymore. I mean, I would say Adeline's weird. She's hilarious. She's not sexy, which is great. I love that for her right now because she should be weird and awkward at 13 and silly. That's where I want our kids to live as long as possible because they don't need to be.
Yeah.
They don't need to be in all that stuff. So, yeah, having relationship stress.
At 13.
I mean, sure, we had little crushes at 13 here and there, but
It shouldn't create stress.
No, and I remember my crushes were like, can I have that pog that you're playing with? And
they said no, and you're like, oh, man.
I want that slammer. I mean, those were that was the stress I was
living. Now you're
living.
aging yourself.
Oh, it's true. Like, anyone remember pogs? I wish we could.
I remember pogs in Australia. If you didn't know, I'm from Australia. Listen carefully. You might hear it.
They had toys in Australia?
Oh, okay. I've had people ask me questions like that. Did you have skateboards in Australia? What's a skateboard? No. Adeline just the other day was talking to a 13-year-old who's dealing with this very thing. She has relationship stress, and Adeline's like, stop it. What are you doing?
No, thank you.
Yeah, which I love that our girl has found some vision for this area of her life.
It's even funny, we'll talk about dating a little bit in this, but it's just funny. What the world is, it's accelerating our kids to be mature in areas that they shouldn't be mature in just yet. And a lot of that's technology, and technology is not going away. And we've got to learn how to create it to be a positive in our life. And I think some of this is the bummer part of technology is it's good, bad, and ugly, and it's definitely increasing, the awareness and availability to, you should be sexy at 13. No, you should be like, speaking into a fan and trying to sound like Darth Vader at 13. That's what you should be doing. Not
I was going to try and do it, but it's going to sound funny.
Please.
I apologize for those listening right now. That sounds weird.
Something like that. It's more what should be happening. Not
what is happening right now?
It's not true. Doing your Shein hauls.
Yeah.
That's enough of that.
Whatever that means. Yeah, totally. I agree.
All right. Let's get into the
Oh,
vision. The vision for what we're trying to, I guess, stir up in our kids an understanding for and value. And I think probably the vision casting, you model it when they're really little. You put that on display by how you treat your spouse and how you protect your time with your spouse and prioritize that by having dates, by going away for a night. I mean, these are all things that communicate that they're the most important thing because they should be, not your kids. I'm sorry, they come second.
Mm-hmm.
I will not go off on my rant, but you protect, you display that throughout their whole lives. But I think that's the loudest piece when they're younger. And then you move into having conversations of what does it mean to value this? What does it mean? And those conversations start, I don't know, 10-ish, we'll say. I'm not an expert on that. That's from my personal experience of 3 kids. So far, it's working out great. So you could have it if you want. You're just smiling at me.
You were going somewhere. It was good. Yes, I think that's a huge part of this is the understanding of healthy marriage. You know, I'm going to say something wild that we believe that sex should be between a man and a woman in a covenant of marriage. Boom. That's what I believe. Which is wild that that's become such a controversial statement. And that, you know, there's so much to think about there, and even getting to brain chemistry and all the things. But I just want to start with, I went to School of Ministry in Bethel, Redding, California, 21 years ago. This is the first time I heard about this thing.
Now you're dating yourself.
No, it's okay. I'm fine with that. But it's the first time I heard Chris Vallison share the story that the Lord gave him. He writes about it in his book, Moral Revolution. There's videos on YouTube. And I just read it recently, his new book about fatherlessness called Uprising. But he describes his story. He was working with about 30-something teenagers on probation. And it's this wild, in Uprising, the new book, he actually describes kind of the scenario and the situation is in. Just these kids are wild because they have no structure in their life. They're just gone through so much trauma. But the Lord kind of downloads on the drive to this gym. He's going to be taking care of the kids while the parents are in parenting classes. And he downloads this idea that he calls, this story called From the Battlefield to the Bedroom. And it's really about the learning to fight for something, to protect something, to save it for marriage. And it's this whole story about this young man saving up for a ring, and he gets the ring finally, and he has to protect it, and he goes to war, and he loses the ring, then he finds it again. And I'll leave it there. And then he ends up in the bedroom with this woman and on their first night of marriage, and he presents it with the ring. And she's like, oh, it's nice. And he essentially says, you have no idea what this cost me. To protect this ring, it's an analogy, to save myself for marriage. And, you know, it feels like it's almost, in some circles, this has become an old idea. It's almost archaic, so to say. You know, this idea of saving yourself for marriage is like, well, that's what our parents did, but not anymore. But there's something about, I think, training our kids with that vision. And the reason I bring up Chris's story is it gives such a great picture and depiction of this. And it's probably even going to really help your kids to catch a vision for, okay, that's what I'm fighting for. That's why I'm fighting against all these emotions, all these feelings, all the flow of culture, all my peers. You know, I remember in high school, this is something my parents helped me develop is this vision. And I remember in high school, all my friends thought I was weird. They'd make fun of me all the time. Like, Ben's not going to have sex before marriage. And something's wrong with him. And they would just essentially...
Yeah, what? He's been married 20 years.
Boom.
Boom, roasted.
Mic drop. But yeah, that was weird. But they didn't get it. They didn't understand it, you know? And I'll end it here because I want to hear what you have to say about this. Since we done this together. But in this story that Chris describes, with these tough, you know, pre-gang member kids that are just gone through so much, they start crying as he's telling this story. And they said, no one's ever told us this before. No one's ever presented a different idea than what the world says. It's powerful.
It is. I think, I go back to my purity ring ceremony, and even in our wedding, when we both had our purity rings that we gave back to our parents, it was a pretty amazing moment to kind of go, we worked really hard on this, and it was harder when we were dating, knowing we were getting married, because we're like, we already said yes. I mean, we already kind of committed our lives to each other. What does it matter if we wait 30 days or not? And I think it's what covenant is I am giving my life to protecting this thing. And so we entered a new covenant on that day. And so we got to give that covenant, because it was fulfilled, back to our parents, of like, we made this covenant with our parents and the Lord. And so I think part of this is that, no one, often in those situations, like what you're describing with Chris, no one's introduced something that is so valuable like this covenant. No one's given, because divorce, just having women or men come through the house as if it's, a new shirt, you try it on and it doesn't fit, I'll leave it. I mean, I think about my dad's story. When he got his master's, he had to write his thesis and or something. I don't remember what he was writing, but he had to kind of write an autobiography of him. And he says he can count 35 different men that came through his home as a young boy. That's a wild thought. So there was no display of what covenant can produce. And I think that's the hard part, is that covenants, if it's introduced poorly, it just feels like a really big rule that doesn't have a reward. But what covenant should be displayed as this most sacred promise that we're going to give our life for, that produces this wonderful, fantastic outcome. Yeah. And that's the hard part, is that marriages right now, or a lot of marriages, they've lost sight of what this covenant actually is, and it's not dying to yourself. It's still serving yourself, which means it's this dysfunctional thing that all the kids are enduring because you have a dysfunctional marriage, because you're not taking care of your stuff, and you're blaming the other person, and you're not actually living in the covenant that you said you were going to when you got married. Yeah. So this covenant that they see, they go, why would I want that? No kidding. The parents need to go and fix this. They're the breakdown of this display of what covenant in marriage should be. And that's the hard truth. Maybe you don't like that. I'm sorry. Not really. You need to work on that if you're trying to cast vision at all for your children of saving themselves for marriage. Why would they ever, if your marriage is this cesspool of misery? Yep. They go, no, there's nothing here that seems worth saving. So why don't I just skip to the good part?
Why would I fight for that?
Yeah. And they think sex is the good part. Sex is just like a side note to the show of what it is that we're actually doing. Yep. I mean, true covenant is that you and I get to be best friends. I live with my best friend. I was laughing at our daughter's description of covenant. It was very much an 18-year-old. She says, I just want to get married so I can cuddle with someone and have my bestie and eat pizza at 2 a.m. I mean, sex wasn't even in there. No. I'm sure it's in there if we really were to get down there. I'm sure it's in there. But what she sees on display is the enjoyment that you and I have in our covenant of marriage. Yep. That we love being together, that we are so content in our relationship as friends. That's what she's like, that's what I want. And that's what marriage is. And it should be. And if it's not, and you're trying to promote your kids to save themselves for marriage, to not having sex, this just seems like a part that they would definitely want to skip. Yep. And that's the hard part about casting vision for protecting this element is if your marriage is a mess, I don't know why your kids see it as vision.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was my rant.
That's great. You should say it. No, don't say it again.
We don't have enough time.
Just rewind.
Yeah.
I think it's such a big piece of this too. And one of the other pieces I think about is there's lots of parents who didn't have this vision.
Yeah.
You know, I have lots of friends who didn't know this was an option. And so they kind of gave in to the whatever it was, and they had sex before marriage. Some married that person, some didn't. You know, that's beside the point. But I think, you know, we have some close friends who did have sex before marriage. They married each other. And then they have these teenage girls now that they're leading in this conversation. And that came out with the girls. And they get to have a really honest conversation of, listen, this is what happened to us. This is what we didn't understand. This is what we've learned since. What we've grown in. This is what we want for you. And then the hard part of parenting is now you have a decision to make. This is the vision I want for you. Here's the guardrails. Here's the boundaries I've set up. And then you have a choice to make, which is the scary part and the exciting part. Because when that child chooses wisely and protects something, it just changes the game. Because I think when we just give in to this thing, and it really is selfish, conversation I have with lots of young men when they're getting ready to get married, they'll come to me and say, you know, I already had sex. And so I'm kind of struggling with this first night thing because I've already done it. I said, well, the difference is, and you already said this a little bit, is that was all about you. This is all about the covenant now. And it's about you and her, and really about her. That it's changing the perspective. Because if you're really confessed and you work that thing out with the Lord, you're free from that. If shame is still attached to it, let's get shame out of the way. Because if I'm bringing shame along with me, I'm gonna have a hard time creating vision for my family and for my kids in this arena if I'm still living from shame.
Hey, it's Brittney here. I'm normally on the Kylo Show, yes, but I wrote a book. I wrote a book for parents, but I talk a lot about moms. So if you're listening to this and you're a mom who's frustrated, who feels like you're failing, who feels hopeless in this game of parenting that we're in. So if that's you, mom, buy yourself this gift on Mother's Day. It's going to be worth it. So I hope that you feel blessed and encouraged by my new book, Imperfect Parenting. You can find it at imperfectparenting.co.
We have to educate our kids too in what covenant is, what we're protecting, what the Bible says about this, and ask really great questions along the way. So when we get to the place, like when we did Delaney's purity ring, it's not a thing she feels forced into because of a belief that, you know, she's still under our house. When we did it, I think she was 15 or about to turn 15, something like that. And, you know, that it doesn't feel like this religious exchange, but really that's something she's choosing.
Yep.
And don't put a purity ring on the table if it's your own agenda. I think that's the other thing, that just becomes this weird symbol if that's what you choose it to be. I mean, we asked the question, would you want a purity ring? Is that something that interests you? Because again, if she doesn't choose this, why would she protect it?
Yep.
You know, it's kind of like if you get your, if you buy something for your kid versus they buy something for themselves, how they treat it.
It's true.
I kind of joked with Delaney that her room we paid for, but her car she paid for. So her car's way cleaner. And I don't know why, except for the fact that she paid for it. I'm like,
It cost us something.
Exactly. I very much believe that that's the difference, is that she can see this thing as the investment in which she's made, and she wants to do whatever she has to keep it the way that she said she wanted it. Yeah. So I leaning into that and navigating that well and bringing in that conversation is really powerful, because otherwise they just are doing this for you rather than for them. Yeah. When you're going, especially towards like a purity ring or something like that. That's my thoughts.
And, you know, the thing I think about often in this conversation is mutual respect and self-respect. I think those two things begin to erode when we just have lots of partners.
Mm.
I watch this with different people
Very true.
in society. Is it just starts to erode mutual respect for each other and my self-respect. That I'm now just moving from partner to partner or from exchange to exchange, looking for the next fix to serve me.
Yeah. We did we talked through or did the Moral Revolution course for the youth group here. Do you remember that? It was a couple years ago now, and when we got to talking about sex at one point, I remember the analogy that I had, which was gluing two pieces of paper together.
Yep.
Because it creates a soul tie. And, it's the most vulnerable exchange that you can have with the human. And then it's this experience that all these emotions are there, and it's beautiful in the right place. But I glued these two pieces of paper together, and I said, okay, I want you to separate them because you're in a new relationship. And I had this other piece of paper waiting. And I mean, it was meant to be more playful, but the illustration of that, they couldn't actually separate these pieces of paper to two whole pieces anymore.
Yep.
They had these fragments, and then I said, okay, now you're in this other relationship, but you haven't had sex yet. And so they're just laying next to each other. I said, okay, now you've had sex. So they had to re-glue what was left and this. And then we got to, all right, you haven't actually done any of the work of cleaning up those soul ties, but now you've met your husband. And so this was number 4. And all they had was like this weird sliver of a piece of paper. I said, all right, this is what you have come to give him because you still have all those soul ties. And what do you think about that? And he saved himself from marriage. How do you feel? And what you talked about before, like the self-respect, they all started feeling shame and embarrassed that this is all that they have to offer. And I love the God that we serve and that he gets to redeem all things. And I don't know how many stories I've heard of literally for ladies being completely restored and their wedding night is the first time all over again. That's even, I think, in Chris's first
Chris
book.
has, I think, hundreds of testimonies of the hymen being...
It's just nuts.
Yep.
So cool. But that was kind of the illustration getting back to when we repent and when we go after the shame and we let God restore what he'll meet us with. And so then I exchanged a piece of paper for a new one and said, this is what happens when you let God in. But that's the other part too, is the shame that lingers. And I had a conversation with this young girl at camp, and she kind of regave her life back to the Lord in full surrender. She hadn't walked away, but she just was living a lukewarm life of this, if you will. And she said, I've done things that I shouldn't have done these things, and I've done them. And I knew what she was talking about based off of the conversation. And we just went after the shame piece that's attached to her because she's going to live disqualified. Yep. And the sad part is that when you put yourself in this disqualified bucket, you start looking for other disqualified things. So you stop looking for, to go back to our last, the vision of God's vision. You look for provision because I have this distorted version of what I think I deserve because of my self-respect. Yep. And so being able to learn how to have these conversations, introduce vision, introduce, what covenant truly is, helping them in the path of moving that direction. And then they decide, because all of this, they're having sex in their teen years more so is when is this going to happen? So being able to have real honest conversations leading up to this moment and then in this season, not pulling away from the reins, but still staying engaged is what we need to be doing as parents.
So the piece right here talking about self-respect, I think the way we build respect with other people and with ourselves is when we follow through with what we said we're going to do. Mm-hmm. So when I get to watch myself do what I said I was going to do, it creates confidence. And okay, I believe me, and you believe me. When I lower that standard and I don't follow through on what I said I was going to do, I start to lose respect for myself. And this is different to shame. Mm-hmm. when shame sits in, that's a whole different thing. And this is where it shows up. When I don't do what I said I was going to do, and I drop the ball or I lower the standard. But when I get restored and then I begin to move in a different direction, I mean, this is Delaney. She had some poor choices. This is you and I. We've all made poor choices. But then we made a decision one day. We said, okay, I'm going to begin to do what I said I was going to do and live the way I said I wanted to live and hold true to that vision. And it begins to change the experience, and it creates momentum. And so this is part of the creating a safe place to fail for our kids, especially in the home. Like I had a conversation recently with some parents, and they said, my children cannot date till they're 18.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I get that. It's scary. Also, if they get to practice dating while in your home, while with some really good boundaries and really good discussions, they get to practice in front of you rather than going out there and have to work it out themselves and really not know what they're doing.
What did Adeline say to that? Didn't she hear you have that conversation?
She essentially said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
that's silly. They should practice while in the home.
Yeah. Which I love that's kind of the mindset that our kids have is our home is a place where you get to practice with a safety net because we're here to help you learn.
Yeah.
We're not here to control you, but we're here to help you learn. I had a conversation with I got a question through Instagram not very long ago, and she says, what do you do about dating? Because my daughter's 16 and wants to date, and I told her we don't date. And I asked her, I said, why are you not dating? And she goes, because she's too young. I said, all right, when is she allowed to date? And it was the same conversation, but I just began asking this mom questions, and she's afraid that her 16-year-old doesn't have a good head on her shoulder and will make good choices. And I'm like, yeah, of course not. She's 16, That's what 16-year-olds do. But did you want her to practice when you're not able to help her? And the beautiful part was through the questions, I didn't realize how I could create an opportunity for her to learn before she's gone, and I don't have any of that anymore. And I'm like, yeah, I get there's definitely should be kind of ages. I think that we've looked at different things and had kind of flings that have shown up at 14 and 15 and 16, and we're navigating like, what does that mean? What does that look like? And it is so hard. I don't have a boy that's dated yet. I just had a girl, and so when a boy is in any way physical with my daughter, I want to throw this coffee cup at his head, because I'm like, there's no, stop it. So what are you doing? Get away from that blanket. There's just all these things that you're like, nothing good happens under our blanket. So there's just this panic that sets in. But if I let the fear lead me, what does it produce? Nothing good. So in the dating world, as they're figuring this out, I have loved that, through the storm of all this, we've asked lots of questions with Delaney. What is your goal? What do you feel? How do you feel like you're doing? What is it that you say you want to protect? And it's not, this is what you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. I don't, especially with this new boyfriend we have right now, super sweet. We really, really like him. But there's not any you can't. Because there's no ownership when I do that.
Yeah.
I think that's the other part of this is we get to say, I need to feel safe. How do you think I feel safe? We don't kiss with tongue. Okay, well, what happens when you kiss with tongue? Well, when you kiss with tongue, you kind of start making out. And then when you're making out, you start laying on top of each other. I'm like, totally.
Gateway drug.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that you got to that.
Yeah.
And on your own. And so you have a different understanding rather than I say, you can't kiss with any tongue.
Watch me.
Yeah, there's no thinking involved to why you can't.
Yeah.
So again, asking questions and this being something that they're choosing to protect, which is why connection is so important.
I was just going to say this.
Okay, well, you can say it.
No, keep going. I love it. We're flowing.
I've been talking for a while. You go.
I like when you talk. But yeah, I think just the keeping the spark alive in front of you, people listening to this. Yeah, just us all the things we talk about in Loving on Purpose and in Parenting 101 on Life Academy, if you haven't watched that yet, all the tools we give away is leading to this conversation. Like these kind of things is the big areas we want to have influence in our kids' lives is preceded by us practicing healthy, deep connection with our kids. For as long as we can, we clean our mess up, we stay connected, we set healthy boundaries. All those things lead to, I get to influence your heart still. And you want me involved. Because I think the thing for me, Seth talked a little bit about Babylon in our last episode together. And Daniel and his three dudes. I'm going to try and say their names, but for the sake of time, he's three dudes. And, they didn't bow down to what was happening around them. They didn't bow down to the societal pressure because they had a different vision. They had a different connection with their God and a different belief. And I think that's where the influencer connection is leading to, is I can send my kids out with confidence and go, you know who you are, you have self-respect, and you have a vision that's going to push you through the chaos.
And that's it is, if we try and force our kids to choose this, they likely won't.
Yeah.
But if we can lead them to a vision and put on display this beautiful thing that is so worth protecting, it definitely makes it easier for them to see that there's value in it. Yeah. And so put down the control and pick up the connection is probably the biggest thing that you need to be focusing on when you're trying to cast vision for saving yourself till marriage and putting on display the value of covenant.
Yeah.
But good stuff.
There's our thoughts.
Okay. Well, we'll see you later here.
All right.